Not exactly a good day of baseball for the San Francisco Giants yesterday. In the doubleheader in Game 1, Alex Cobb departs with an injury and the Giants lose in extra innings. In Game 2, Logan Webb takes his first loss in nearly a full calendar year. So we'll break that down and talk about the level of concern with the slumping offense next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about this awful day of baseball, really, if you're a San Francisco Giants fan. 2 games, 19 innings of baseball, and 2 losses. So, it goes sometimes. The Giants fell to 7-4, and a good Mets team beat them twice. But, there's a lot more to it than that. They lose Alex Cobb to an injury. Logan Webb didn't look great for the first time in almost a year, basically. And the offense just by and large continued to, I don't want to say struggle, because we're going to look at some of the numbers. I mean, yes, they struggled yesterday, and they've struggled a lot so far in the early season, but we're going to look at some of the numbers, compare them to the league average, look at some specific hitters, and just look for what's going on here, because there is a lot going on. But Alex Cobb, the injury is probably the biggest takeaway from yesterday, because it affects future games, not only yesterday's game. But so the injury is a right groin strain, right adductor strain. Is it what they're the technical way that they're just, a right adductor strain. And you could see that it was bothering him during this start. And what's I don't want to say interesting or funny, but he was cruising, and the game was cruising along. The Giants led this game 4-1 going into the bottom of the 5th inning, and it felt like a game that they were going to win. But it all kind of came crumbling down in that 5th inning, with the Mets scoring 3 runs to tie the game and Alex Cobb having to exit with this injury. A lot of those hits, let's remember too, it was like a swinging bunt single that just rolled down the line and stayed fair. The Mets just were in love with the lines in that inning, down the left field line, down the right field line, just hit after hit right down the line, not hit particularly well. Cobb keeping the ball on the ground, and it was just kind of a misfortunate inning is how it felt. And then, there was a replay review that went against the Giants. It would have been a double play, which would have been 2 outs, nobody on base, and I think no runs in. But it's a bang-bang play at first. They originally called him out, and they overturned it. And I don't know. I'm not sure there was enough there to overturn it. And then that was a theme later on as well to end the game, or not to end the game. In the top of the 10th inning, it looked like the Giants were going to score that, quote, ghost runner by Tylor Estrada being safe at first base. And he was called safe, and they overturned that as well, even though there also, to me, wasn't enough there to overturn it. So I'm kind of bouncing around here. I want to focus on Cobb just for a minute. So he had to cover the base a couple of times in that inning. So just kind of taking off to first base seemed to aggravate that groin. It was cold and windy in New York. It's been a very, very cold road trip for the Giants thus far. And so anyway, he says that it's mild, but they did put him right away on the 10-day injured list after the game, in part because it allowed them to add players who were already there as extra men for the doubleheader. And so they were able to add both of the guys who were there. Junior Marte, who had another really solid performance last night. But without Alex Cobb, it's definitely a blow to the Giants' rotation. But as we saw throughout the rest of these games yesterday, the bullpen was able to carry the load pretty well. Sammy Long, an inning and a third, scoreless, 2 strikeouts. Nobody allowed runs out of the pen except for Harleen Garcia, and that runner was the phantom, quote, ghost runner. And so the bullpen has been, was really good yesterday, and it remains to be seen how they're going to fill that spot with Alex Cobb needing to miss at least one start. But it could be Tyler Beede. It could be Sammy Long. It could be that they call somebody up from the minors, like maybe Sean Jelly, who's on the 40-man roster. I would tend to think it's probably more likely that they go with guys who are already on the active roster, like Beede and Long, maybe piggybacking or even just a straight bullpen game. But when you have guys like Beede and Long already on your pitching staff, it kind of makes sense just to roll with those guys in that game that Cobb will miss. So hopefully there's some optimism that it could just be one start that he misses. But ultimately, I mean, he was kind of pitching well again, and so it's a shame. But he does have an injury history. I don't want to call a guy like injury prone, but he has a long track record of injury, and this is another one. So coming up next, I want to talk more about the offense. I want to talk about some of the specifics of these games, including the replay review and why I thought that there wasn't enough there to overturn it, and how it really played a major role in deciding the outcome of the game. So all of that in just a minute, but first, BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting stats and info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Again, I'm going to say this one more time about Carlos Rodon Cy Young odds. I think that he's being a little bit overlooked. Certainly before the season started, he was like way down there with some other guys who I thought had a much lesser shot of winning the Cy Young Award. But Carlos Rodon on the mound again today. With every start he goes out there and shoves, these odds are going to get a little worse from a betting perspective. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. As promised, I want to talk about a lot of other different things, including the replay reviews that proved to be kind of fateful for the Giants in Game 1 specifically. And I also want to talk about the state of the offense and the level of concern and compare them to the league average, look at the expected numbers, talk about a ball that Mike Yastrzemski hit, actually a couple of balls that Mike Yastrzemski hit yesterday that on another night might have made a difference, but were caught last night. So thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast, recaps of MLB games with analysis from our local experts, taking fans through the season like no other network. Free and available wherever you get podcasts. So if you follow me on Twitter, you see that after every game, Sunday through Thursday, I put out a little quick recap video where it's not just recapping the game, but the key takeaways from that game. And all of our network does this on the MLB network for us, and it goes into a podcast called Locked On Now. So be sure to check that out. Anyway, let's talk about the replay reviews a little bit before we get into what I've seen from the offense through 11 games. But I don't know. I mean, what else can you say? Basically, I thought in both cases, particularly the one in the 10th inning with the Giants, Estrada seeming to beat out a throw from Francisco Lindor that seemed to pull Pete Alonso off the base. It was very close. I'm going to admit that it was very close, but because it was so close, I thought that the call on the field would be tough to overturn. And the idea is that typically you need clear and convincing evidence that the opposite call would have been correct. But I don't know how you could really see that. The thing is that, and Dave Fleming, to his credit, was mentioning this at the replay command center in New York, by the way. That just always makes me a little suspicious when they're in the city where the team, I don't know, people working in that room there's probably some Mets fans, not the umpires, but the staff in that room. And so I don't know, maybe could you be influenced by that? Maybe. But they have the ability to like take multiple different camera shots and time them up. And you can see like on one camera shot, this is exactly when his foot leaves the base. And then on the other camera shot, where was the ball relative to his glove at that exact frame? And so they have that ability, and perhaps there was just 1 or 2 frames where they believed his foot was still on the base and the ball was in the glove. And that's how they're able to make that call. So I would assume that that's kind of what happened. But from the angles I saw, even the super high def shots in super slow-mo, I couldn't tell with certainty. It looked like his foot might have been on the base, but you can't tell with certainty from any of the shots I saw, any of them, exactly when his foot came off. And so for such a big call with an umpire right there looking at the base, I just thought there wasn't going to be enough to overturn it. I thought maybe, but it was a major call because it took a run off the board. It ended the inning, and all of a sudden the Mets only need 1 to win the game, and they got it. So, it probably should have been a double play anyway. It was like it took a mistake, a wide throw by Lindor to pull Pete Alonso off the base, so we thought. So, we're kind of grasping at straws here because they really just didn't get it done in that top of the 10th inning, and they were fortunate that the throw had pulled him off, so we thought anyway. So, and then there was the earlier call. It would have been a double play that would have meant 2 outs, nobody on base. Cobb probably wouldn't have gotten hurt at that point because everything would be different. So a couple of replay decisions really affected the Giants in game 1, but also they just stopped scoring after the early innings. So that's a good segue to talking about the offense, which I think gets a lot of attention from fans, and rightfully so. I mean, to me, they've been underwhelming offensively through the first 11 games. It is important to remember we are talking about 11 games. However, I mean, it's so now on the season, they are a couple ticks below league average by weighted runs created plus. So believe it or not, a 223 average, a 299 on base percentage, and 374 slugging is about league average when you put it all together, according to weighted runs created plus. So league offense is down across the board. I actually want to cue that up so we can talk about the league average offense as well. League average right now for batting average is 231. League average on base is 310, and league average slugging is 373. So the Giants come in below average in pretty much everyone. They're a tick above that in slugging percentage, but because their batting average is lower than the league average, their isolated power is actually significantly better than league average, but that's a little complex. We don't need to get too into that. But suffice it to say, overall, roughly league average offense, and it's, of course, combining their good games, combining their bad games, just overall. So as much as people are, blowing me up on Twitter saying that the offense is terrible, you have to keep in mind that the league average offense right now is pretty bleak. And a lot of it has to do with the weather. A lot of it probably has to do with the humidor being in every ballpark, and maybe that's what's keeping some of these balls hit by the Giants from going out of the ballpark, which could be a concern, right? If you're a team that hits a lot of home runs and kind of relies on those balls that you hit well in the air going out, if all of a sudden they're not going out, that could be cause for concern. But I think it's a little premature to really worry about that. And I think so far it's had more to do with the weather. They've been hurt. I think that ball Yastrzemski hit that would have tied the game late would have been a homer maybe on a different night. He hit it a little too high, 35-degree launch angle. At the time, it was the only barrel in the entire game. Barrel being, it has to be hit at least 98 miles an hour, has to be hit, I'm like blanking on it has to have at least a 500 expected batting average and 1,500 expected slugging. So it was the best hit ball of the night in the second game, and it found a glove. And so that's just kind of how it's gone a lot for the Giants in the early season. But the fact that they have a sub 300 on base percentage, to me, is a red flag. And when we dig kind of deeper into some of the numbers, there's guys like Darren Ruff who just completely hasn't gotten it going. And he is supposed to be and still should be expected to be a huge part of this offensive unit. It is a little odd. They're facing like almost all right-handed starting pitching. And so maybe a guy like Ruff or Flores can't totally get into their perfect rhythm when they're facing the more difficult platoon split all the time, basically. So in just a minute, I want to dig deeper into the specific players who are making up this offense that has been roughly league average overall, but with, man, a sub 300 on base percentage, it's easy to see why some fans are getting antsy about them. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? Is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have a computer with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. So why choose to endure that and spend 30, 50, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership when you can save time and money when using Rock Auto? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. So do yourself a favor and go to rockauto.com right now to see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices. All the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, as promised, I want to get more specifically into some of the players on the offensive side. See if we can, I don't know, I'm like digging for reasons for optimism here, but also just kind of digging for the truth to see what's going on behind their relatively slow start offensively. I do just want to point out, in the second game, when they scored only one run, they were facing Max Scherzer, who was just on his game. And sometimes when you're facing a really good pitcher, it's kind of like an opponent facing Carlos Rodon and then trying to judge their offense based on that game. So Rodon goes for the Giants tonight. Hopefully he can quiet down these Mets bats. The Mets basically have played like the best team in baseball through this many games. Their hitting has been the best, and their pitching has been the best, or at least close with the Giants in terms of being the best. So, by the way, the Giants got to Tylor Megill. They kind of lit him up early, and he hadn't even allowed a run on the season, and he was the talk of town in New York. So, I don't know. I mean, in the second game, I'm willing to give them a pass, certainly, for getting shut down by Max Scherzer. It's probably the 2,000th time he's done that. I'm exaggerating, but that's what he does, and that's why they gave him 3 years, 130 million. They gave him a lot of money over a short-term deal. But anyway, I mean, the likes of Brandon Belt, I think he didn't have his best game yesterday, but still, he's leading the team in a lot of categories. He's got a 395 on base. It's funny, we were talking about average on balls in play in an episode yesterday, and we said Belt is going to come down, but he's not reliant on that, and he'll still be good even when that number comes down. And that's exactly what happened yesterday. His batting average on balls in play came down from like 380 to 304 in one day, which just goes to show you we are still in the land of very small samples. And despite that, he still has a 176 weighted runs created plus with a 395 on base, 278 isolated power. He's just overall been a monster still. Jock Peterson had some more good swings yesterday, including a home run off, was it off Megill? I think it was off Tylor Megill. And for the rest of the day, he was pretty quiet. He did yank a ball foul off of, was it Max Scherzer? I can't remember exactly who was pitching with all these different swings, but he crushed it, but just foul. But he continues to have some of the best at-bats among the Giants, and he's been pretty consistent all year long so far. Joey Bart, it continues to be a weird line where he's got a 500 average on balls in play. He's homering on 2/3 of his fly balls. And it's a little bit concerning when the numbers overall have come down to the point where he's only got a 240 batting average. The on-base percentage has helped, by the walk rate being up, but there's a lot of room still to fall in the average on balls in play department. Almost by half it's going to fall. And if you're only hitting 240, 367 on base, and you've got hundreds of points that are going to come off your average on balls in play, that's a concern. And the issue is the strikeouts. You can't strike out half the time and be a good offensive player. There's just not enough opportunity to succeed when you're putting the ball in play. I mean, you might succeed at a certain rate of putting the ball in play, but it's just not in play enough to be productive at the plate. So he's going to have to tone that down. Thairo Estrada, I see all these people kind of celebrating that he's arrived and La Stella might be out the door, but I don't see that at all. Estrada still just has a 262 on base percentage, so that's well below average. I'm intrigued, but a lot of, at bats against right-handed pitching are kind of ending in weaker contact, maybe on the ground. And I just think that they would be in a much better spot if they had Tommy La Stella and Estrada could platoon a little bit more. And maybe, I just think La Stella's bat is missed out of this lineup against all these righties that they're seeing, as is Lamont Wade Jr.'s. And the guy who's playing all the time, who wouldn't otherwise probably be playing all the time, hate to say it, but Steven Duggar, who's got a 194 average, 235 on base, 290 slugging, great defense in center, really reliable out there, good base runner so far, but the offense just hasn't been there. And so the bottom of the lineup with Duggar's spot coming up in big spots, it just hasn't really been able to be a productive spot, and his strikeout rate is over 40%, which is really high as well. Brandon Crawford has generally struggled. He did have a huge hit in game 1, 2 out, 2 strike, 2-run single. The expected numbers for Crawford are much better than the actual numbers. Same is true for Wilmer Flores. And if we look down at the guys who have struggled more, Kurt Casale, I don't think anyone really expects much offensively from him. And how about Darren Ruff? It's been a struggle for him, and they need to get him going. Austin Slater, he had that huge hit on opening day, but otherwise it's been much of a struggle for him. And where is Mike Yastrzemski? I'm not even seeing him on this list. Oh, I've got to go to the next page to find Mike Yastrzemski. Overall, hasn't been a good line, but he continued to hit the ball kind of well, and he hit into some bad luck yesterday. He's got a 240 weighted on base average, but a 332 expected weighted on base average. So I'm encouraged by the way he swung the bat yesterday, and I would expect him to, if he can keep that going, I would expect the results to follow a little bit. So I'm ready for a Mike Yastrzemski breakout. Maybe it starts today. So that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues past and present. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot. So thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. Stay Locked On Giants.